Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Raptor Queens podcast, the first ever all-woman podcast covering the Toronto Raptors. My name is Sarah Khalil. Today, I am joined by my other queens of the North, Allison Hope and Jade Auxiliary Things Johnson. Great to have you both here, and great to have all you listeners here. Thanks for joining us today. Today, big news. The Raptors are in Florida. They just went down. They're the first of all the teams to go down to begin this new NBA bubble experiment. We are definitely going to touch on that a little bit later in the podcast, but obviously that's very big news, and it's the Raptors only who are currently, in Florida. So we want to touch on that. And we also have generally some other things going on in terms of league rules about what it's going to look like down in the bubble. We're also just generally going to talk about NBA reopening in Florida. There's some new rules that came out, so we'll touch on that. And this week, Masai Ujiri was the guest on the Waj pod, and he was talking about a lot of different things. We're going to touch on Masai and his comments on the podcast, and we're also going to be taking a look at Masai and his future, and what do we think. Where do we see Masai in 5 years? So that's another thing we're going to be talking about today. Also, it was Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of our Raptors who are fathers. And we've got some little tidbits about Father's Day fun for the Raptors as well. So that's what we have on tap for you today. And we're going to get started with a discussion about Masai Ujiri and his appearance on the Waj pod. Adrian Wojnarowski interviewed Masai Ujiri, and they talked for about an hour, and they talked about a lot of different things. They talked about especially what was going to be happening in terms of coming back, some of the behind the scenes about how Adam Silver has been handling all of the owners and the executive and the players, and how basically what the conversations have looked like. So that was really neat to get some inside scoop. And then we also had Masai comment generally on racism and the way that the league can take responsibility and be a leader in battling and combating racism. So there was quite a lot that went on, and we all took a chance to listen to it. Jade, why don't you kick us off? What really stood out to you about Masai's comments during that podcast?
Yeah, I mean, listening to Masai speak is always kind of a pleasure. Generally, the Woj podcast is not really on my radar. I tend to prefer smaller, more independent podcasts, more of our peers as Raptor Queens, but of course, I made an exception for this one. And I actually had a kind of disheartening but interesting experience over the last couple of weeks with everything with the racism stuff going on in the States a lot, but we have it here in Canada too. And for people that don't know me, I am a mixed heritage, mostly Jamaican, but I also have Irish and Chinese in my background, not too far back. And I was raised in a predominantly white community. And I'm single, so I was doing my single girl thing, and I was talking to this guy that I met online on a dating site, and he's this Black guy, and kind of every time we talked, he was talking about being at the rallies and being a big part of the movement. And I got to a point where I said to him, listen, I'm not really that Black girl. Like, I'm not the girl that's going to want to talk to you about this every day. I'm not the one that's going to go stand with you out at protests holding a sign. Like I said, it seems really important to you, and I don't want to waste your time. And he ended up calling me things that I cannot repeat here, and generally just saying I was a horrible human being because I wasn't supporting my people. And little does he know, I was raised by a white stepmother. My siblings, although we share a dad that I grew up with, look like white kids. You would never know they had a Black father. All my cousins and aunts and uncles that I grew up with are white people because I was raised by my stepmom for my entire memory. So I don't have people based on an ethnicity or a background. And that's one of the things that I feel as a woman of color, that as a Black community, we rely on too heavily, of saying it's our people. And Masai said something on the podcast that really, I think, needs to be more of an attitude of us as people of color, in saying that it's not really about race when it comes down to it. He said, this is about asking yourself who you are as a person. Who are you as a human being? And at the end of the day, if everybody is asking that question and behaving accordingly, treating all human beings with dignity and respect and kindness and all of that stuff, that solves all the problems right there. And I thought it was really important that although he's talking about race and he's talking about how there is a disparity, the solution isn't in race. The solution is in treating everybody like human beings that are deserving of being treated well. And it's disheartening for me when I have experiences like I had with that guy to know that when we take that stance, we're putting up another barrier that does not need to be there. So how do we expect that we're trying to be included with everybody, but we're still separating ourselves by saying, oh, this is my people, when the solution is everybody needs to treat everybody like human beings deserving of being treated like human beings.
Thank you for sharing your story, Jade. That was very generous of you.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that's I think is wonderful about Masai, and having him as a leading voice in this area is really just an honor to get to listen to him. He's very passionate, he's very thoughtful, and he has an interesting perspective because he's lived in America, he's lived in Canada, but he hails from Africa. And I find that international experience brings something unique and extra to the table. And it's great, Jade, that you found his words resonated for you in that way. Allison, what about for you?
Well, the same as Jade. This is the first time I've listened to a Woj pod, and I was kind of disappointed with the cheesy Scott's Lawn Care commercials, but there were a lot of takeaways for me with this one. It was interesting that Masai revealed that Adam Silver responds to his texts at 2:00 in the morning. That was kind of interesting. And then Woj asked him, but what team characteristics or team traits that would contribute to the team's success in Orlando? And I think his answer was pretty telling. So he said, he kind of snickered and he said, I can't disclose a lot of team secrets, but he identified Bobby Webster, Nick Nurse, quote, keeping this together. And then he identified fitness, health, and strategy. And he said the coaches are working on the strategy. And then he mentioned mental toughness. And he said, we're paying attention to that. So Masai doesn't speak casually. So I think that's going to be one of the main components that the Raptors are going to be relying on for success. Something else that caught my ear was that Woj actually admitted some white privilege, because he said that when Donald Trump made the comments about the African countries, and I can't repeat what he said on our podcast, he said that Masai was the only team president that he contacted as a Black man. And why was that? Why didn't he contact any other team presidents? So I thought that was kind of revealing also. And then the other thing that kind of surprised me, Woj asked Masai the difference in his life post-championship. And it was, I mean, I know speaking for all of us, the championship has had an indelible impact on us as Raptor Queens. And Masai said he didn't enjoy it as much as he thought. He said, I have a note here, while it's happening, you're so in it, you don't even enjoy it. That's the fact. And after the parade, it's on to the next. When you're sleeping, other people are winning. So there's no time to sleep. So he said he enjoyed the parade, and yeah, that was kind of revealing also. So if anyone hasn't had a chance to listen, he's just such an inspiring guy. You know, it's a must listen.
That last bit that you just said really struck me as well. just this idea that they won the championship and then he was immediately back to work. And how many times have we said on this podcast, it starts from the top? Because that mentality is completely reflected through the entire Raptors team. I did not get a single moment or sense from this team that any of them were taking a break or that this was it and they won and that's it now. From like even over the summer with Fred and Pascal in Las Vegas playing, improving their game, like I don't think any of them rested after that championship. And that is got to be completely reflective of Masai and Kyle. Those are the two leaders on this team I think that reflects.
Exactly. He is driven and he's instilled this culture. So, I mean, we're very fortunate to have him.
And I love that Masai is driven in a way of still always being like the best human being he can be, right? Like he's going to win, but he's not going to win at any cost, but he still gets it done.
That's an interesting point because he's very, like he said it on the podcast, he said it before, the point of sports is to win. That's actually it. That's why you're there. Jade, I remember when we were talking about Michael Jordan and The Last Dance and your definition of GOAT having to include greatness, not just on the court, but in the way that you conduct yourself as a human being. It sounds like maybe there's some space on your GOAT roster for Masai Ujiri.
Oh, there's definitely room for Masai, no question.
Okay, yeah, that's just really interesting to note that he's so competitive, but there's just so much humanity in everything he does as well. Yeah, and then I also thought it was really interesting to have some kind of insight into the way that the conversations have gone about resuming the league. So like you were saying, Allison, about Adam Silver answering text messages at 2 a.m. Masai also said, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times how open-minded Adam Silver was. And that
Caught that.
Yeah, and that kind of brought up 2 things for me. One, clearly Adam Silver is open-minded. He must have been entertaining ideas from everywhere. And you'd have to be because he's trying to balance the interests of so many different people. But the other thing that it made me think was Masai really values open-mindedness in leadership. And he likely brings a lot of that to his own style as well. So those are the 2 things that stood out to me about that.
I think that's really true. And the best leaders do. The best leaders are looking for input from wherever they can get it, right? They surround themselves with people they can trust. And the point of that is so that everything isn't on their shoulders to come up with every new idea, because they realize at the end of the day, they're just one person and more ideas are always better, even if they are the ones that do have to make that final decision.
And at the end of the day, it's one person can only ever represent one perspective. And so, yeah, exactly. It's really important to be open-minded and see points of view from different people with different experiences. So speaking of leadership though, Jade, that actually is a nice segue into the next, topic that we wanted to bring up today, which is also a topic that I think a lot of Raptors fans are a little bit nervous to talk about. Maybe they don't want to, but we're facing the fire and we're just going to ask the question. The question is, where do we see Masai in 5 years? And I think the reason that this question can potentially break Raptor fans' hearts is because we all can see that this is a really great man and he's going to have opportunities in any area that he would like to have an opportunity. So this is a bit of a speculative conversation. None of us know Masai personally, obviously, and who knows what the world will look like in 5 years? Who knows what it will look like next month? But for a little bit of fun and a little bit of speculation, Allison, why don't you go first? Where do you see Masai in 5 years?
Well, I know none of us know him, but I will point out that I am 3 degrees of separation from him, and I'll have to tell that story one day. But anyway, I would be super happy if in 5 years he was still the president of the Toronto Raptors. And I mean, the fact that our rise to respectability and then to champions has been under his guidance, that's no coincidence. And I always remember after we were eliminated the first time by Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals, Masai's comments about assessing the team after the playoffs and analyzing the team. And he's just got just this clear-minded ability to make short-term decisions that support his long-term vision. I mean, that's a gift of leadership. I mean, Masai Ujiri is a visionary. And every time I hear a replay of his comments that we will win in Toronto, I get absolute goosebumps. So he can seemingly accomplish every goal he sets out for himself. And um, he's able to like identify and plan and implement and then kind of assess everything. And I look at the way he cut his losses with Bruno Caboclo. And I mean, that was something that Brian Colangelo could have and didn't ever do with Andrea Bargnani. So where do I see him in 5 years if he's not the Raptors president? Obviously a leadership role of somewhere.
Well,
You know, I
Allison,
was thinking,
can I just ask you, because I want to hear your viewpoint. What do you think would be the drive or the reason that Masai would remain as the president and choose being the president of the Raptors over everything else that may present itself? Why do you think that this would matter to him enough that he would choose to stay here?
because he's innately competitive. So any other leadership opportunities that I thought would be suitable for his talents, they involve more collaboration. I think inherently he's so very competitive that that would be an appealing part of staying on as team president.
Okay, that's really fascinating. Thanks for sharing that perspective. What else were you going to say? You were going to say, if not the president, then...
I mean, as he speaks of the continent, that's obviously very near and dear to his heart. And so you wonder about some sort of leadership role in like an NGO. But again, the fact that he's so competitive, I kind of can't see that happening. I could almost see him as an NBA commissioner. Sorry, Sarah. I know that Adam
That's
Silver.
okay.
I looked up his age is only 58. So, and he's I think by all accounts a very good commissioner. And I mean, I can't see his tenure being short. But I kind of see Masai as having higher aspirations than being the team president of the Raptors. As sorry as I am to say that.
Interesting. All right, Jade, over to you. What are your thoughts about Masai in 5 years?
Yeah, so I'm going to say Allison stole my thunder a little bit.
I'm highly flattered.
I agree. As somebody who, like, I'm the type of person that once a problem is solved, I tend to get bored, even if things are running really well. And I kind of think I see some of that in Masai. So having built the Raptors from being a team nobody gave a shot to champions and champion contenders the next season, having lost a superstar, I think there is going to be a level of this is not enough. It's not going to be enough for somebody like him. And I do see him as a commissioner, especially in the climate that we're in. Like, it's time for there to be a Black commissioner in North American Big Four sports. There's no better time for it. That said, like she mentioned, Adam Silver is young, and it's probably not going to be in 5 years. But if we remember, Adam Silver worked hand in hand with Stern, and he was the pick for years before he actually took over as commissioner. So, and knowing, like we talked about, that Silver responds to his text messages at 2 a.m., that relationship is obviously already there. So I see a lot of parallels there between Adam Silver's relationship with Stern and Masai's relationship with Adam Silver right now.
That's a really good point. I mean, there's no question that that the league just generally respects Masai. He's one of the most sought after executives. New York always reportedly wants him. Washington wanting to make offers. Yeah. And like probably LA too. At some point, LA is going to be like, we're the biggest market. Come over here and try to take everybody from the Raptors. But yeah, so I mean, Allison, I appreciate your point though about the competitive part of his personality, maybe not being satisfied in a commissioner role because you're not really a competitor in that role.
The way I see
Yeah.
it, he's taking on football. Can we make the NBA bigger than football? I mean, it's a long shot, but isn't that the kind of thing that would drive a guy like him?
I don't know. Would it?
Feels competitive to me.
Okay. I mean, I guess so. I guess you're competing for marketing dollars and advertising dollars. But that seems so boring compared to winning sports games.
The thing is, like in basketball, what bigger thing is there to win? He's already won it. Right? The NBA championship is the biggest award in basketball on the planet. That's why so many international players come to play in the NBA. And coaches, like Nick Nurse was an international coach before we got him.
Yeah, but we can see that one is not enough for Masai. I mean, I think that's clear.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. That's why this is like 5 years plus down the line. And especially with the conversation of, oh, but you had Kawhi and blah, blah, blah. I'm for sure he wants to get another one without that asterisk, that other people, not that we feel that way, but that conversation is definitely real.
Yeah. And assuming if the season was to finish and if the Raptors were to win this season, a lot of people would, again, put an asterisk on it. And in that case, Masai would have to come back for a third championship. He'd have to three-peat. This is what would have to happen.
For sure. I've had this conversation with other Raptors fans too. It's like, this is the worst possible year. And I know COVID is horrible for a lot of other reasons. I get that. I'm not trying to minimize that. But the fact that we finally won and Katie was hurt and we had Kawhi, and then we get this season that is not like a regular season, that is it going to finish? Is it not going to finish? And now we're going to be finishing in just the most unique circumstances in NBA history, in ABA history, like in professional basketball history anywhere. It's automatically going to be a thing. Although, I think we've talked about this, it's a level playing field more than has ever happened before in the playoffs because every team is coming back healthy. So to me, it's kind of like an anti-asterisk, but we know that conversation is going to be out there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I guess that leaves me with my thoughts on where Masai will be in 5 years. Honestly, Allison, if you hadn't made your point about him being competitive and the competitive nature, just like wanting to win things, I would have not really even considered remaining as the Raptors president even an option, but I think you made a really good point. And if the Raptors keep winning and he can keep doing that, then maybe. Although I do think that the other side of this, that he would be looking for more of a challenge or a new and different challenge, is probably applicable. Jade, I can see the NBA commissioner side, but my prediction, this is all speculation anyway, well, I guess this could fit in the NBA commissioner role, but I just see him taking on a very active expansion role of the NBA in Africa. And just like whatever future the NBA is going to have in Africa, I think he's going to be a really important part of it. He also has a lot of connections with political figures all over the world, it sounds like. So I wonder if there's a career in politics. That one I don't know, because mostly smart people don't like to go into politics is mostly my experience, but or at least I don't know, I'm not a big fan of politicians and politics generally, but I can see that he could potentially go there and would probably be good. That's all.
He would make a fabulous prime minister.
Yeah, I know that you really want him to be our prime minister, Allison.
Actually, I saw a really funny comment on Twitter, just like make him prime minister. We don't even have to have an election, which I thought was quite funny.
Wasn't
But
that your comment?
no, it was not.
Just
No,
kidding. I know it wasn't, but I can see
surprisingly.
that you might think that.
I kind of feel like Sarah feels. I feel like he's the type of person that getting into politics would feel cringy. Because even though he's not going to be that person, he's got to deal with all of those people as his job every day, day in and day out. And I feel like he's the kind of person that would just rather not. And also, there's so much placating that has to happen as a political leader. Whereas as the leader of a sport or a sports team, he can be in a position where the buck stops with him, kind of regardless of what anybody else says.
Yeah, like give him the right platform outside of politics, and could he accomplish more?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, that was an interesting little discussion. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and all of you listeners, thanks for indulging our thoughts about where he will be in 5 years. Let's turn it over to Allison for our tea time segment. Allison, go ahead.
So I will tell our listeners that I'm filling in for the uber cool Sonali here on Tea Time, and it would kind of be equivalent to putting maybe the ball girl in as a sub in the game 6 of the championship. So I'll do my best here. Uh, as far as Father's Day, which was on the weekend, the Raptors Twitter account had a really cute, it was about a 2-minute long video. And Fred talked about his kids being an escape for him when his body is sore and when he's feeling the pressure. And TD2 made an appearance with his son, saying that his son motivates him and it puts life in perspective for him. And then there was a cute montage with Kyle getting his kids ready for a presentation at Villanova. And also with him celebrating with his sons directly after the championship game, and him saying, "I did it for you," which they caught on audio, which was kind of a tearjerker for me. And before we get to the players, Paul Jones put out a lovely tweet along with his brother Mark from ESPN about their dad. And Paul did tell us on our podcast that he guested on that his dad had died 10 days after the Raptors championship parade. So quite sad. So Serge had kind of a funny tweet. So he tweeted some fatherly advice from his own dad that kind of sounded suspiciously like an advertisement. And it was said, "Smell like your own man, use Old Spice." But it was at Old Spice. And then at the end, he confirms that it was an ad with hashtag sponsored, obviously. Pascal had a very sweet tweet with just this beautifully rendered picture, a drawing of his dad, kind of surrounded by doves with his with hands and a prayer emoji saying, "Doing it for you, R.I.P. Dad." Kind of a tearjerker as well. And Terrence Davis tweeted Happy Father's Day to his coach from Ole Miss, Kermit Davis, which was kind of nice. And then Kyle tweeted a picture of his sons, Carter and Cameron, on kind of what looked like a hiking trip with the hashtag Kings. And then Fred just retweeted the Toronto Raptors official account of the montage of players as dads. And then Marc Gasol, he's obviously quite busy remodeling his body. He just retweeted his brother Pau Gasol's tweet about their amazing dad. So he didn't go to a whole lot of work for that.
Oh my gosh, that's just like sibling writing, like, "Hey, I bought a card. I'll just sign on your behalf."
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have. I'm not on the gram, so I couldn't go any further with that.
Well, thanks, Allison, for sharing all of that. And like we mentioned, happy Father's Day to all of the Raptors who are fathers. And yeah, Allison, you did a great job filling in for Sonali. Just great. So thank you for doing that. All right. So let's move to our Around the League topic, which focuses, at least in the first bit heavily on the Raptors because the Raptors are the first team to arrive in Florida, and they arrived today. And yes, they arrive in the midst of I don't know, a very active COVID state, and there's some nerves going around Twitter. Hey, Allison, just all sorts of tweets. People saying I'm gonna lay on the tarmac to prevent them from going, or if any of my Raptors get sick, and then some fill in the blank with some sort of meaningless threat. But yeah, so there's definitely some nerves from the Raptors fan. What do you think about this, Allison?
Well, for sure. I'm part of a Twitter chat group. And yeah, people are really expressing anxiety over this. And just from a personal perspective, we have in Ontario, we're the last jurisdiction to reopen. We're still in phase one. And the big problem is the congregate work settings that the temporary foreign workers are living in. Their living conditions aren't good. So there's certainly parallels with congregate work situations like what we're going to see in Florida. So that's certainly worrisome.
Okay, Jade, what about you? Nervous? Not nervous?
I'm not nervous. And it's not because I don't think COVID is a thing or that it shouldn't be important. But I'm the kind of person that, while I respect everyone's right to an opinion, sometimes I remove my own right to an opinion depending on criteria. And this is one of those times. For me, if the players who are going to be physically there and the people who are going to be physically there feel comfortable enough to be there, for me, it's like, who am I to say they shouldn't be? If they feel comfortable in the precautions that are being taken and the measures that the league has gone to, it's their health at risk, it's their family's health at risk, and they have the option to opt out until the 24th. So today is the 22nd, so we might see a lot of other players opt out. The Raptors are already there, so we know everybody, at least from our team, is in. But given the fact that they do have that option to say, I'm not going to go, and the players that want to play, want to be there, say, I'm good, I feel like my opinion is kind of moot. Like, who am I to say that the league shouldn't do it if the people who are at risk are okay with it?
Okay, fair enough. I do think it's interesting that the Raptors go first in the sense that we had the entire Raptors team go. None of them opted out. And I do think that sets a tone for the rest of the league, because there could have been an objection from the Raptors, and that objection would have trickled through all the way through all of the teams arriving later, the same way that their non-objection will trickle through.
So you're basically saying this is a we the champs moment.
Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, yeah. I don't necessarily, it's by virtue of them being champions. I'm sure it's because it's a Canadian team, and so they just had to get to Florida for, quarantine reasons. But yeah, like, who was it last week? Someone tweeted, if LeBron plays, we all play. That's just how this is going to go. And now I'm kind of like, or is it if Toronto goes to Florida, we all go to Florida? Is that how this goes?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, being first always sets a tone, right? I really like that we were the first team to arrive, whether it was just logistics or it was a bigger statement than that. It wouldn't surprise me if they intended it to be a bigger statement than that. And I'm glad that they all went, because one of the conversations I keep having is that a lot of people seem to think that if we wait long enough, COVID is going to go away and things are going to go back to before March. So a lot of people I've been talking to on Twitter seem to have this notion that if we wait long enough, we can resume life and sports as if COVID's over and it never happened. as if it was pre-March when things shut down in this part of the world. And I see Allison shaking her head because I think she probably agrees with me. It's silly to think that this is not a thing that's going away wholesale in a short period of time. We hope there's going to be a vaccine. Vaccines take time. Vaccines aren't always 100% effective. We've seen resurgences in recent years of sicknesses that we thought had been eliminated by vaccines years ago. So the idea that we have to get to a place where there's zero risk is not viable for our lives. It's not viable for sports to come back. That's just not the reality that we live in.
But agreed. But I was reading, so the PGA just restarted last week, and they've already had one positive case. And Major League Baseball, MLS Soccer, and the NHL all have cases. And if I remember correctly, the Jays have shut down their training camp. So these settings where a lot of people are in close proximity is a big problem. And it's a big problem in Florida too. So yeah, to me, this is all kind of worrisome.
Interesting points, Jade, about that it's not. It's true that there is always a risk that you could just get sick. And I think that that's one thing if you are looking at it from an individual perspective, just generally you could get sick, whether it's COVID or flu or whatever, and probably most of these players will be healthy. It does seem like just generally there are a lot of states that are ill-equipped for handling the numbers of people who are getting sick, and that's the whole reason for all these shutdowns is less about the individual and more about healthcare systems generally. So I guess maybe one way to look at this question is, will the NBA going there significantly contribute to those numbers? And like maybe not. Maybe the way that they have it set up was thought of from the lens of not just risks to players and people going to be in the bubble, but the risk that it would have outwardly as well. So yeah, interesting.
Well, I just want to point out, Woj, one of his tweets, there was apparently an article sort of retweeted from the NBA's health and safety protocol. And this is a direct quote. And I found this shocking, but I probably shouldn't lead with that. So, quote, the occurrence of a small or otherwise expected number of COVID cases will not require a decision to suspend or cancel the resumption of the 2019-2020 season. So, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean like 5 people can get sick and they'll keep going? Does that mean 10? Does that mean 15? I just found that kind of shocking.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like if there's actually a number, and if so, what's the number based on? Because you could just pick any number and it could be arbitrary or it could actually be rooted in something. So I'm assuming that there are people on their decision-making team and on their COVID planning team that have put their brains to this, although I haven't seen any details about it.
The thing I was going to say, if we go back to Masai saying how open-minded Adam Silver is, right? He's getting as much information as there is possible to get about this. And if he thought that they would have had to shut down, like Adam Silver has demonstrated that he's willing to lose money for the good of free speech for NBA personalities, if we think about the China issue. So I don't question that he'd be willing to lose money for the players' health, especially the players' overall 22 teams and support staff that are going to be in Orlando. So I don't doubt for a second that he has weighed this heavily. I'm sure he's had a lot of sleepless nights of late. And that whatever information he's getting, he's confident it's the best information he can be using to make decisions.
Go ahead, Allison.
I just had, assumed that one case would shut it down. Apparently, that's not correct.
No, and I didn't see that doesn't surprise me at all because like that goes back to what I was saying. I think Adam Silver is aware of what our new reality is, and that is people are going to continue to get COVID. We're not like in Ontario where we've been under 200 cases for most of the last week and a half, if I remember correctly. We had one spike over 200 in that time. And that's huge improvement on where things have been, but it's not nothing. And we're a long way from it being nothing. And for all practical purposes, this is not a thing that's ever going to be nothing before there's a vaccine.
Yes, probably.
That's a good point. All right. So just a couple, there are a lot of rules about this NBA bubble, a ton of them. So I'm just going to read out a couple of them. And I'll just quickly, before we wrap this up, kind of get your perspective. What would it be like for you if you were a player and these were some of the rules you were following? Because it's like some sort of weird restricted summer camp, but here's what we have. So this is depending on what phase you're in. Let's skip to phase 3. So this is when most of the teams I think have actually arrived in Florida. So individual workouts are all going to be mandatory. Head coaches are allowed to participate and observe, but group workouts are still prohibited, and no more than 8 players are allowed in a facility at one time. So that's kind of phase 3. That's a week. And then after that, we move into phase 4, and all the players and staff have to stay isolated in their rooms. Players have this option to wear what's being called a proximity alarm, and it will notify a player if they spend more than 5 seconds within 6 feet of another person who's also wearing the alarm. So it only goes off. Jade, you're laughing. Why are you laughing?
Oh man, that just gives me the giggles because there's another tweet that I saw that there's also going to be a hotline for if people in the bubble see someone breaking the rules. There's going to be a hotline to call. So like the alarm thing just seems to fit with that. And I found the hotline thing to be hilarious. So now this proximity ring thing is just giving me the giggles.
Yeah. Okay. Another rule that kind of strikes me as odd is everyone on the NBA campus has to wear a face mask unless they're eating or if they're in their rooms. And I just think it's so strange because the players are all going to be like so close to each other, just constantly when they're playing. And so it just seems odd and unhelpful that they'd also have to wear a mask.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, I know what my mom was telling me about, she made masks, but she looked up lots of information and didn't just sew together a t-shirt, like, because she works her and my dad both work in essential services, right? So she did lots of research before she made hers. And the thing I think of having played basketball is trying to really play and breathe through those. Like I've had appointments the last week where they've asked me to wear a mask. So of course I do. And I hate it. Like I couldn't wait to get it off. I couldn't imagine playing basketball in one.
Yeah. Well, and they're not being asked to play in them, but it's just a strange.
But if they're not playing it with them, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Maybe to protect the staff and like the training staff and the coaches.
Well, that's a good point, Allison. Yeah, you make a good point. All right. Well, anyway, so these are some rules. Guests aren't going to be allowed until after a team advances past the first round. So that's interesting. But yeah, so lots of brand new adventures for all the NBA players down in Florida. Florida already is an adventure state based on all of the Florida Man articles that you can Google. If you don't know what I mean by Florida Man articles, just Google Florida Man and
you're welcome.
And you're welcome. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be a fun time. All right, ladies, any final comments on Florida, Raptors, Masai?
Oh, I just want to add, apparently if the players, there was some comment about if they're playing cards, they can play, but they have to throw the deck out after. So I guess at some point they're going to be allowed out of their rooms to sit together to play cards. I don't know what phase that's at.
I don't know. Honestly, I just think it would be such a strange experience just have all these grown men playing basketball, but they can't leave.
You know what? That question's been going around a lot since The Last Dance ended of what's the next sports docuseries you want. I want Orlando in the bubble. I want footage. I want a documentary. That's what I want to see.
That would be fun.
Yeah. Allison, would you watch it?
Yes, most definitely.
All right, that's good to know. Okay, thank you to all of you who are listening. Thank you for tuning in. It's wonderful to have you here. We'll have more information on all things Raptors next week, including updates about how Florida's going, I'm sure. So be sure to tune in at Raptor Queens, Twitter, Buzzsprout, Apple, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and iHeartRadio. So many great places. You can listen to wherever podcasts exist. And in the meantime, stay Raptors fans. And, well, what else is there to do, really? Stay safe. Bye.